He said it was just coffee. But when the son of her patient began showing up every morning, always knowing exactly how she took it, Nurse Karen Brown felt the first crack in her carefully guarded world, a crack that would expose the truth she never saw coming. The heart monitor hummed its steady rhythm, a metronome of calm against Karen's racing pulse. The stranger by the window turned as she entered. His movements were smooth, unhurried, the kind of poise that came from never needing to rush for anything. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a dark three-piece suit that looked far too expensive for the fluorescent sterility of St. Luke's Hospital. He held 2 paper cups in his hands. "Welcome back, my strong and beautiful family, to Mr. Crown Stories. If no one's reminded you today, you are enough. You are worthy. You are seen. This story is for the ones who give their all and still feel unseen, the healers, the helpers, the ones who keep showing up even when no one says thank you. It's for the quiet souls like Karen, who care for others while hiding their own scars, and for anyone who's ever wondered if love could find them again. If this touches your heart, hit subscribe, drop I'm here in the comments, and tell me where you're listening from. Because tomorrow, I'll be back with another story, one written for hearts like yours, brave, tired, but still believing. So sit back, breathe deep, and remember, you matter more than you know. Now, let's begin. "Morning, Nurse Karen," he said with a small, easy smile, as if he belonged there. "Extra cream, 1 sugar. You looked like you needed it yesterday." Karen blinked. "You remembered that?" "Of course." His voice carried a warmth that didn't quite match his cold, polished look. "You save my father's life every day. Coffee's the least I can do." Her brain stalled for a beat. Family members didn't bring nurses coffee. Family members complained, demanded updates, and argued over visiting hours. But this man, Mr. Donnell's son, she assumed, was calm, kind, observant. And that, in her experience, was always when people became dangerous, when they were too nice. Still, refusing felt rude. She took the cup cautiously, her fingers brushing his just long enough for her heartbeat to misstep. The warmth of the drink seeped through the cardboard and into her skin. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Mr. Donnell." "Ryan," he corrected gently. "Please. Just Ryan." "Ryan," she repeated, unsure why saying his name felt heavier than it should. Karen turned toward the monitors, checking vitals she already knew were steady. "Your father's condition has improved overnight. His vitals are strong. If this trend continues, we'll reduce his oxygen support by tomorrow." Ryan nodded. "That's good to hear. You've been incredible with him." "It's my job," she said automatically, keeping her tone professional. "I know," he replied softly, "but not everyone does it with heart." His sincerity unnerved her. She wasn't used to being seen, much less acknowledged, for anything beyond efficiency. 12-hour shifts, 2 jobs, endless bills. Nobody thanked her for being exhausted. "I should finish my rounds," she murmured, stepping back. "Thank you for the coffee." "Of course," he said easily. "See you tomorrow, Nurse Karen." Something about the certainty in his voice made her pause. Tomorrow. He said it like a promise. By the time she reached the nurse's station, Karen's pulse had steadied, but her mind hadn't. She told herself it was nothing, just politeness. Gratitude. Some people expressed it differently. That was all. But as she sipped the coffee, perfectly balanced between sweetness and cream, she wondered how he'd known exactly how she took it. She didn't remember telling him. "Let me guess," Marcy said, sliding up beside her at the station with a smirk. "Tall, dark, and suspiciously rich is here again." Karen sighed. "He's visiting his father, Marcy. That's all." Marcy arched a brow. "He's also visiting you. Every morning. With coffee. From that new artisan cafe that charges $6 a cup. For a man like that, this place is purgatory. If he keeps showing up, it's not for the 4-drip. Stop." Karen laughed, despite herself. "You're reading into things." Marcy grinned. "You should too. Reading, I mean. Into his eyes." Karen shook her head. "You're impossible." "Maybe," Marcy said, already backing away, "but I'm not blind." Karen turned back to her charts, pretending to focus. But her friend's words lodged themselves in her thoughts. Why did Ryan keep coming so early? Why did he bring her coffee instead of the doctor's? Why did he remember small things, like her sugar preference, her night shift schedule, or how she always rubbed her temple when she was exhausted? She told herself not to read into it. Not to want to. Wanting led to disappointment. She'd learned that lesson already. By the end of her shift, the coffee cup sat empty on her desk. She should have thrown it away hours ago, but something about tossing it felt wrong. Like erasing proof of an unusual kindness. Karen worked her way through her remaining rounds, her body moving automatically through the motions. Check vitals, update charts, adjust medication, but her mind kept drifting to the man in the expensive suit and the way he'd said see you tomorrow like it was inevitable. She hated the way it made her feel, alive, visible, caught off guard. It had been years since anyone had made her nervous in a good way. When her shift finally ended, she slipped her stethoscope into her locker and sat on the bench in the staff lounge for a moment, staring at her reflection in the small metal mirror. The woman staring back looked tired, competent, controlled. The same woman she'd rebuilt herself into after her marriage fell apart 5 years ago. There was no room for charm or flirtation in her life. Not after what it had cost her the first time. And yet, there was that spark again. That dangerous, stupid, hopeful spark that came whenever she thought about him. Karen told herself she'd come in early to review patient charts before rounds. She told herself she wasn't hoping to see him again. She told herself it didn't matter. But when she turned the corner toward room 304, he was there, again. Same posture, same quiet confidence, same 2 cups in his hands. He looked up, smiled, and held one out to her. "Morning, Nurse Karen," Ryan said easily. "Thought you could use this. Long night." Her throat went dry. "How did you know I worked the night shift?" "You mentioned it yesterday," he said with a small shrug. "You looked tired. I thought I'd get here early today." She took the cup automatically, her fingers brushing his once more. It shouldn't have meant anything. It shouldn't have felt like something. "You really don't have to do this," she said softly. "Maybe not," he replied, glancing at his father. "But I like to." She studied him for a long moment. The dark circles under his eyes, the faint crease between his brows. He wasn't just playing polite. There was weight behind his calmness, something that looked a lot like loneliness. And against her better judgment, Karen's guard slipped a little. Later that morning, as she checked Mr. Donnell's 4-line, Ryan watched her work quietly. "How long have you been a nurse?" he asked. 12 years, she said without looking up. "That's dedication." She smiled faintly. "Or survival." He tilted his head, curious. "Survival." Karen pressed her lips together. "Let's just say it's the one thing I'm good at." Ryan studied her with a look that was both gentle and uncomfortably perceptive. "I find that hard to believe." She felt the heat rise to her cheeks. No one looked at her like that, like they actually saw her, not just the uniform, not just the function. It unnerved her more than she wanted to admit. "I should check on the other patients," she said quickly, turning to leave. Ryan nodded, but his voice stopped her at the door. "See you tomorrow, Nurse Karen." The way he said it, calm, certain, deliberate, left her pulse unsteady again. The next morning arrived before Karen was ready for it. Her alarm blared at 5:30, slicing through the thin silence of her apartment. She groaned, rolled over, and silenced it with a slap. For a long minute, she just stared at the cracked ceiling, trying to will herself up. Her legs ached, her back protested, and the smell of stale coffee lingered in the kitchen from the night before. 12 years in nursing and mornings hadn't gotten any easier. By 6, she was in her car, half awake, a lukewarm thermos of caffeine in her cup holder. The city was gray, soft rain misting across her windshield as she pulled into St. Luke's parking lot. Same space. Same routine. Except now, she couldn't ignore the flicker of anticipation stirring beneath the exhaustion. Because she knew he'd be there. Room 304 was quiet when she entered. The steady hum of machines filled the air, mingling with the faint antiseptic scent that clung to every inch of the ward. Mr. Donnell was still asleep, but his son, of course, was waiting by the window. Ryan. He turned when the door opened, that same calm smile appearing instantly, as if he'd known exactly when she'd walk in. "Morning, Nurse Karen." He held up the familiar paper cup like an offering. "Extra cream, 1 sugar." She swallowed a smile she didn't want him to see. You really don't need to keep doing that. Maybe not, he said easily, but I like traditions. Traditions. The word lingered between them like a secret. She took the coffee, fingers brushing his, pulse quickening. How's your father this morning? Better, Ryan said, his voice softer now. He's starting to talk again. Said he was dreaming of your chicken soup. Karen blinked, half laughing. That canned broth I made for him last night? Ryan's smile deepened. Apparently, it's the best he's had. She shook her head, moving to check the monitors. That's just the medication talking. Or maybe he just knows good cooking when he tastes it. Her cheeks warmed. You're impossible. And yet, you still take the coffee, he said. She didn't have an answer for that. Over the next few days, it became a pattern, a quiet rhythm stitched into the chaos of the ICU. Every morning, Ryan Donnell appeared at precisely 7:30. Always early, always with coffee, always with that calm, steady presence that unnerved her more than she cared to admit. The other nurses noticed. By the third morning, Marcy was waiting for her at the station, leaning against the counter with a grin that spelled trouble. Morning, sunshine, Marcy said. Guess who's already here with your daily caffeine fix? Karen sighed. Don't start. Oh, I started days ago. Marcy followed her down the hall, whispering dramatically. Do you know how many visitors come here that early? None. Zero. Nada. Except Mr. Billion-Dollar Smile in 304. He's just visiting his father, Karen muttered. With coffee that costs more than my lunch, Marcy said, eyes gleaming. And every morning, too. You've got an admirer. Karen stopped at the door to the patient room, turning to her friend. He's just being kind. That's all. Marcy smirked. Right. And I'm just a nurse for the free scrubs. Marcy. Fine, she said, backing away with her hands raised. But if he proposes, I'm wearing sequins to the wedding. Karen rolled her eyes and pushed the door open. Inside, Ryan was already standing beside his father's bed, murmuring something she couldn't quite hear. When he looked up, his smile was soft but tired. Rough night? She asked, sensing it immediately. Yeah, he said quietly. He was restless. The nurse said he called for my mother twice. Karen's chest tightened. That's normal. Memory fragments like that can happen during recovery. Ryan nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. Still, it's strange hearing him say her name. She's been gone for years. She hesitated, then placed a hand on his arm before she could think better of it. He's still healing. You both are. For a moment, their eyes met, something fragile, something unspoken sparking in the silence. Then she stepped back, pretending to check the monitor again. Vitals look good, she said quickly. I'll have the doctor review his file later today. Ryan exhaled, a faint smile returning. And you'll be here, right? I'm always here, she said. Good. By the fifth morning, the coffee came with breakfast. Karen walked into room 304 to find not only her usual cup waiting on the counter, but also a neatly wrapped bag from her favorite cafe downtown. The one she'd mentioned once, weeks ago, in passing, when she joked to Marcy about never affording their pastries. She froze. How did you? Ryan looked up from his father's chart. You told me about it. Said it's where you go on your rare days off. That was months ago. I have a good memory, he said simply. She stared at him. You really shouldn't have. I wanted to, he replied matter of fact, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. You take care of everyone else. Someone should take care of you for a change. Her throat went tight. You don't even know me. Ryan met her gaze, steady, unreadable. Maybe I'm trying to. Karen looked away, her pulse unsteady. It's not a good idea. Why not? Because it never is, she whispered. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Later that afternoon, tragedy struck the ward. It wasn't her patient, technically. A young man in his 20s came in after a motorcycle crash. She and her team worked on him for nearly an hour, their hands moving fast, their hearts faster. But when the monitor flatlined, and the doctor finally called time of death, Karen felt something inside her collapse with it. By the time she slipped out into the hallway, her chest was burning. She pressed her palms to her eyes, trying to breathe, trying to stay composed. Nurses didn't cry. Not here. Not where families watched you for signs of hope or despair. She was leaning against the wall when she heard his voice. Karen. Ryan's tone was soft, tentative. She turned sharply, swiping at her eyes. You shouldn't be here. He hesitated at the corner of the hallway, still in his suit but without the usual calmness. I was on my way to grab coffee for the nurses. I saw the code blue on the monitor. I didn't know. Her voice broke before she could stop it. We lost him. Ryan stepped closer, cautious but sure. You did everything you could. It's never enough, she whispered. Not when they're that young. He didn't say anything this time. Instead, he stepped beside her, close enough that she could feel the quiet steadiness of his presence. For a moment, she wanted to push him away, to keep the line between them clear and professional. But when he reached out and gently placed a hand on her shoulder, she didn't move. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't pity. It was simply comfort. Human, grounding, and desperately needed. Karen exhaled shakily. You shouldn't see me like this. Why not? Because I'm supposed to be the one holding everyone together. He gave her a small, sad smile. Even the strongest people get tired, Karen. Her name on his lips sounded different this time. Soft, reverent, intimate. She let herself lean against the wall, eyes closed for just a second longer. Then she straightened, stepping away from him. Thank you, she said, her voice steadier now. But you should go back to your father. He'll be waking soon. Ryan nodded slowly. Of course. But as he turned to leave, his hand brushed hers again, a fleeting touch that left an ache in its wake. That night, Karen sat in the staff lounge staring at the untouched sandwich on her tray. Marcy plopped down beside her, chewing gum and holding a can of soda. You look like you've been through a blender, Marcy said gently. Karen sighed. Rough shift. I heard. I'm sorry. They sat in silence for a moment, the low hum of vending machines filling the gap. Marcy nudged her. He came by again, didn't he? Your coffee guy. Karen smiled weakly. He saw me crying in the hallway. Marcy's brows lifted. And he didn't say anything. Just stood there. Marcy's grin softened into something understanding. Maybe that's exactly what you needed. Karen shook her head. He shouldn't care that much. He's a visitor. He has his own life. A real one. Not this. This. Marcy repeated, arching a brow. You mean the life you built with your own two hands? The one that's keeping people alive every day. Marcy. Listen to me, she said, cutting her off. You think too much. Sometimes people care because they see something worth caring about. You ever think of that? Karen looked down at her sandwich. He's too good to be true. Maybe he's just good, Marcy said softly. Not everything has to hurt before it's real. The following morning, when Karen arrived at the hospital, she tried to tell herself it would be different. She'd keep her distance. Professional. Detached. But as soon as she stepped into room 304, there he was again, standing beside his father's bed, sunlight cutting across his sharp features. 2 cups of coffee waited on the counter, steam curling upward like an invitation. Morning, Nurse Karen, he said quietly. She couldn't help it, she smiled. You're relentless. He laughed under his breath. Persistent. There's a difference. She took the cup from him, shaking her head. You realize people are starting to talk, right? Let them, he said simply. They can say whatever they want. She studied him, curious. And you don't care about gossip? Not about this, he said, eyes holding hers. Karen's pulse stuttered. Before she could reply, Mr. Donnell stirred, murmuring softly. Ryan immediately turned, his focus shifting back to his father. The tenderness in his face disarmed her completely. This man, she realized, wasn't just wealthy or charming. He was gentle in a way that couldn't be faked. And that made him dangerous in a whole new way. Later, as her shift wound down, Karen found Marcy again at the nurse's station. Her friend leaned on the counter, scribbling notes with a knowing grin. So, Marcy said without looking up, On a scale of 1 to hopelessly smitten, how bad is it? Karen glared. It's not like that. Marcy raised an eyebrow. Ma'am. You say that every time your cheeks go pink. Marcy, he's just, Karen exhaled, setting down her clipboard. Why would a man like him care about someone like me? Marcy looked up, her smile softening. Maybe because he sees something you don't. Karen stared at the floor for a long moment, her throat tightening around a truth she didn't want to name. Maybe, she thought, it wasn't about the coffee anymore. Maybe it never had been. The hospital quieted after 9. That was Karen's favorite time of night, when the day shift chaos faded, the fluorescent lights dimmed, and the hallways took on a fragile stillness. It was the hour where she could finally breathe, even if just for a moment. Her shift had ended an hour ago, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. Something about Mr. Donnell's readings that evening had tugged at her instincts. A slight drop in blood pressure. Restlessness in his breathing. It wasn't urgent, not yet, but enough to keep her uneasy. So she stayed. She slipped back onto the ward, shoes soft against the linoleum. Most of the lights were off now, casting long shadows between the rooms. She could hear the distant hum of monitors and the low whir of a cleaning machine somewhere down the hall. When she rounded the corner to room 304, she slowed. The door was slightly ajar. And from inside, she heard Ryan's voice. At first, she thought he was speaking to his father. But then she heard the tension, sharp, clipped, unlike the easy warmth he usually carried. I told you to delay the merger, he was saying. His tone was low but firm, the kind of voice that didn't ask, it commanded. No, I don't care what the investors want. Not until my father's health stabilizes. Do you understand me? Karen froze just outside the door. The sound of that voice, measured, powerful, didn't belong to the man who'd been bringing her coffee and pastries all week. This was something else entirely. She stepped closer without meaning to, her heart pounding. I said delay it, he repeated. I don't want another headline. If the board pushes back, remind them who's holding the majority shares. And tell Martin if he goes behind my back again, I'll replace him before the next quarter. Silence followed. She heard him exhale, softer now, like the weight of the world had settled on his shoulders. Karen's mind spun. Merger. Board. Shares. Those weren't the words of a visitor, or even a businessman casually checking in from work. That was the language of power. And suddenly, every polished inch of him, the tailored suits, the quiet confidence, the mysterious restraint, clicked into place. Ryan Donnell wasn't just his father's son. He was someone important. Karen backed away, pulse racing. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the realization hit her so hard she couldn't move. All this time, she'd thought he was just another professional, maybe a lawyer, maybe someone running his own small company. She hadn't imagined this. Her breath caught as his footsteps neared the doorway. She turned quickly, pretending to read the chart on the wall. The door opened, and Ryan stepped out, phone still in hand. His expression softened instantly when he saw her. Karen, he said, surprised. You're still here. She nodded, forcing her voice to sound steady. I wanted to check on your father before I left. His blood pressure was a little low earlier. That's kind of you. His shoulders relaxed slightly. You're off shift, right? You should be home resting. I could say the same to you, she replied quietly. Something flickered in his eyes, guilt, maybe. Or recognition. Did you hear any of that? He asked finally. Karen hesitated. Enough. Ryan exhaled and glanced down the hallway before tucking his phone into his pocket. I didn't mean for you to hear it that way. That way, she repeated, her voice sharper than she intended. You mean the part where you sound like you own half the city? He winced slightly but didn't deny it. It's not what you think. Then what is it? He studied her for a long moment, the air between them taut. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm again, but not the easy calm she was used to. This one was deliberate, careful. My full name is Ryan Donnell, he said. I'm the CEO of Donnell Enterprises. Karen stared at him. The words didn't compute at first. Donnell Enterprises, the name was everywhere, the new downtown skyscraper, the tech subsidiary, the charitable foundation that sponsored hospital wings. You mean, her throat went dry. You're that Donnell? He nodded once. Karen stepped back before she could stop herself. You've been coming here every morning, bringing me coffee, and you didn't think to mention that? I wasn't hiding it, he said quickly. Not really. She laughed softly, disbelief laced through it. Not really? You let me think you were just some kind, overworked guy with good manners. I am that guy, he said, his voice low, steady. The rest doesn't matter. It does to me, she snapped, surprising them both. The sound of her voice echoed faintly down the empty corridor. Ryan's expression tightened. I didn't want you to treat me differently. Karen crossed her arms, heart pounding. You think I would have cared? You think that's what this was about? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration flashing briefly. You'd be surprised how people change when they find out who I am. I've spent years surrounded by people who want something from me. For once, I just wanted to be normal. The honesty in his tone disarmed her more than she wanted to admit. But the wall was already up now, cold, solid, necessary. Normal, she repeated, voice trembling slightly. You don't get to walk into my world with your fancy suits and $6 coffee and call that normal, Ryan. You don't live here. You visit. He flinched at that. You're right. For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick, heavy, and full of things neither of them knew how to say. Karen looked away, blinking fast. I need to finish up here. Karen. Please, she said quietly, not meeting his eyes. Just go home. Ryan hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. When he spoke again, his voice was soft, almost a whisper. I never meant to hide who I was, he said. I just wanted to be seen as a son, not a name. And then he was gone. Karen stood in the hallway long after the sound of his footsteps faded. The weight of what she'd heard pressed down on her chest. Ryan Donnell. CEO. Billionaire heir. She thought about all the moments that suddenly felt different now. The expensive suits, the way he always paid attention, the quiet confidence that came from someone used to being obeyed. She should have guessed. How had she missed it? She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. Part of her wanted to laugh. The other part wanted to cry. Because for the first time in years, she'd let herself trust someone. She'd let him make her smile. And now she wasn't sure which hurt more, the lie itself, or the fact that he hadn't really lied at all. By the time she checked on Mr. Donnell, the old man was awake and smiling faintly. Evening, Nurse Karen, he said weakly. Did Ryan go home? Yes, she said softly, adjusting his blanket. He just stepped out. Good boy that one, Mr. Donnell murmured. Works too hard though. Always has. His mother used to worry he'd burn himself out before he hit 40. Karen's chest ached. He seems dedicated. Oh, he is, Mr. Donnell said with a weary smile. That company of his, it's his whole life now. I used to tell him, money can't keep you warm at night, but he never listened. Karen managed a small nod. I'm sure he'll figure that out one day. She checked his four, smiled politely, and stepped out before her composure cracked. Outside, the city glowed faintly beyond the hospital windows, towers of glass reflecting streaks of moonlight and rain. One of those towers, she realized, probably belonged to him. Ryan Donnell. The name sounded too big for her world. She wrapped her arms around herself, staring through the glass until her reflection blurred. For a week, she believed they were two people meeting halfway, him the grateful son, her the tired nurse. Simple. Ordinary. Human. Now she knew better. And yet, somewhere deep in her chest, the echo of his voice lingered. I just wanted to be seen as a son, not a name. It shouldn't have mattered. But it did. For the next few days, Karen did everything in her power to avoid him. She swapped shifts with Marcy. She took her breaks in the basement lounge instead of the third-floor cafe. She even started using the side stairwell instead of the elevator, just to dodge the chance of seeing that tall, calm man with a coffee cup in his hand and that same quiet look in his eyes. It was childish, maybe, but necessary. Because every time she thought about Ryan Donnell, the Ryan Donnell billionaire, CEO, heir to a family empire, her stomach knotted. She could still hear his voice from that night in the hall. I just wanted to be seen as a son, not a name. And some part of her wanted to believe him. But another part, the older, more bruised part, knew better. People like him didn't stay. Not for people like her. The hospital had a way of swallowing time. Between 12-hour shifts, emergency calls, and the constant hum of fluorescent lights, days blurred together. Karen buried herself in work, letting exhaustion take the place of thought. When she wasn't checking vitals or charting updates, she kept her hands busy, folding sheets, replacing IVs, anything that kept her moving. But even busyness couldn't quiet her mind forever. It happened one night when she was restocking supplies in the storage room. The soft click of glass jars reminded her of another time, another kitchen, another silence. Her mind drifted back to the day her marriage ended. 5 years earlier. The house had smelled like burnt toast and lemon cleaner. She'd been packing lunches, her hair still damp from the shower, when Mark came in with his phone pressed to his ear and that same distracted look he always wore lately. He'd said it so simply, like announcing the weather. "I think we should take a break, Karen." A break. As if you could pause a marriage like a TV show and come back when it suited you. At first, she thought it was stress, his long hours, the failed IVF attempts, the doctor's cold words, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Brown, but it's unlikely you'll conceive naturally." But when she looked up, Mark wasn't angry. He was relieved. He'd said, "You're a good woman, Karen. There's nothing exciting about us anymore. I can't do this. I need more than this." More than this. The words had sliced clean through her. She'd watched him pack his things that night, his suits, his cologne, his smile that had once made her feel lucky. She'd stood in the doorway, holding a coffee mug with trembling hands, wondering how something that started with love could end so quietly. When the door closed behind him, she promised herself one thing: she would never depend on anyone again. The sound of a dropped clipboard snapped her back to the present. Karen blinked, realizing she'd been standing in the supply room for nearly 10 minutes, lost in memory. "Get it together," she muttered under her breath, brushing her hair back. She finished the rest of her shift on autopilot. By the time midnight rolled around, the ward was nearly empty. She slipped into the break room, planning to sit in the dark for a few quiet minutes before heading home. The vending machine hummed softly. The only light came from the moon spilling through the blinds. She was halfway through her lukewarm tea when a familiar voice broke the silence. "I was hoping I'd find you here." Karen froze. Ryan stood at the doorway, still in his suit, though his tie hung loose and his sleeves were rolled up. He looked tired, really tired. His usually composed expression was softer, worn. She straightened immediately. "Mr. Donnell, you shouldn't be here after visiting hours." He smiled faintly. "I think I can make an exception." "Please don't," she said, keeping her tone even. "You have an empire to run, remember?" Ryan exhaled, stepping further into the room. "So that's how it's going to be?" She didn't answer. He leaned against the counter, watching her quietly. "You've been avoiding me." "I've been working." "You've been hiding," he countered. "And I get it. I do. I should have told you who I was sooner." Karen set her cup down, her hand trembling slightly. "You think that's the issue? That you just forgot to mention you're a billionaire?" He didn't flinch. "No. I think the issue is you don't trust what's real anymore." She stared at him. The words hit too close, too clean. He continued softly, "Karen, I didn't come here to defend myself. I came because I wanted you to know why I come here every day. It's not because I have nothing better to do. It's because this place, it's the only place that feels real anymore." He paused, his voice thickening slightly. "When my mom died, I was 22. My father drowned himself in work, and I followed. I didn't want to feel anything, so I built the company. I made money. I fixed problems. But I didn't fix me." He swallowed, looking away. "The truth is, I haven't had a real conversation with anyone outside a boardroom in years. And then one morning I saw you here, calm, patient, steady, and I remembered what kindness looked like. I didn't want to lose that." The room was silent except for the steady hum of the vending machine. Karen's throat tightened. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because it sounds like something I might want to believe," she whispered. Ryan's eyes softened. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing." She shook her head. "You don't know me. I've built my life on not needing anyone. I think you've built your life on surviving, he said gently. And that's not the same thing. The words hit her like a soft punch to the chest. She turned away, blinking fast. This is crossing a line, Ryan. Whatever this is, it has to stay professional. He nodded slowly, stepping back. Then I'll keep bringing coffee, professionally. Despite herself, Karen laughed, a small reluctant sound that cracked the tension between them. He smiled, the corner of his mouth lifting just enough to soften everything about him. You see? That's all I wanted. For you to stop looking at me like I'm a headline. She hesitated, her heart thudding faster than it should. And what are you then? He looked at her for a long time before answering. Someone who wants to know the woman behind the scrubs. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The air between them was different now, heavy, but gentle. The kind of silence that didn't need filling. Finally, she cleared her throat and said quietly, "You should go. Visiting hours are long over." He nodded once, but there was a warmth in his eyes that lingered even as he stepped toward the door. "Good night, Nurse Karen." She tried to sound unaffected. "Good night, Mr. Donnell." He paused in the doorway, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "It's Ryan." And then he was gone. Karen sank back into the chair after he left, her pulse still unsteady. The shadows of the break room seemed softer now, less lonely somehow. Her walls were still up, firm and familiar, but she could feel a small crack forming somewhere deep inside them. She rubbed her palms together, whispering to no one, "You can't trust him. You barely know him." But a small treacherous part of her heart whispered back, "Then why does it feel like you do?" The first spark came on a Thursday morning. The kind that starts small, innocent, almost laughable, and then grows into something that can burn down a life. Karen was on her way out of St. Luke's, her scrubs wrinkled and her coffee half-cold in her hand. It had been another long night, one of those shifts where everything blurred together. Too many charts, too few nurses, too little sleep. She didn't see Ryan until he stepped out from behind the hospital cafe's patio fence. "Rough night?" he asked, holding up a familiar cup. "Triple shot cappuccino, extra cream. I figured you'd need it today." Karen gave a tired laugh. "You and your coffee. I should start paying you rent for keeping me alive." He smiled, that warm, easy kind of smile that always seemed to cut through her fatigue. "You can just keep taking the coffee. That's payment enough." For a brief moment, it was just them, two people standing under the soft gray light of dawn, the world still half asleep. He handed her the cup, and their fingers brushed, a spark flickering somewhere she tried to ignore. And then she laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. Neither of them noticed the phone camera aimed their way from across the street. By afternoon, the photo was everywhere. Billionaire Heir spotted with mystery nurse outside St. Luke's. Karen nearly dropped her phone when she saw it. The headline glared from every screen, social media feeds, gossip blogs, even a few news outlets that should have known better. The picture was grainy but unmistakable. She was mid-laugh, eyes bright. Ryan was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. It looked intimate. Too intimate. Her heart plummeted as she scrolled through the comments. Who is she? Guess money really can buy anything. Probably another gold digger playing nurse. Does she even work there, or is this some publicity stunt? Her hands shook. She could barely breathe. By the time she reached the hospital that afternoon, whispers followed her like shadows. Two nurses at the station went quiet as she walked by. Someone laughed behind a clipboard. Even Marcy's expression was uneasy. "Oh, Karen," Marcy said softly, pulling her aside. "Have you seen?" "I've seen it. It's all over the news." Some reporters camped outside the front entrance asking for comments. Administration's freaking out. Karen pressed a trembling hand to her temple. It was just coffee. That's all it ever was. Marcy looked at her gently. "You know that. I know that. But the internet doesn't care." The summons came an hour later. Human Resources, 3 p.m. She sat in the sterile office, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across from her sat Ms. Franklin, the head of nursing administration, and a grim-faced HR officer she barely recognized. "Karen," Ms. Franklin began, voice clipped but not unkind, we've received multiple complaints about appearances of unprofessional behavior. Appearances. Karen repeated, trying to keep her voice steady. The photo circulating online has brought unwanted attention to the hospital. We pride ourselves on maintaining boundaries with patients and their families. I have maintained boundaries, Karen said, heat rising in her chest. That picture, someone took it without permission. It's being twisted into something it's not. Ms. Franklin sighed, lowering her voice. I believe you. But perception matters. The board is concerned this could escalate. You understand how donors react to scandal, especially when a name like Donnell is involved. Karen's stomach dropped. So that's it? You're saying I should take the blame because he's rich? Karen. No, she said, voice breaking slightly. You don't get to make this about boundaries when all I did was my job. I treated his father. I accepted a cup of coffee. And now I'm being punished because someone decided to make a story out of it. The HR officer cleared his throat. We're not terminating your employment. But it might be in everyone's best interest if you consider taking some personal leave until things quiet down. Personal leave, she echoed bitterly. You mean until I disappear? Ms. Franklin's eyes softened. Karen, please. This isn't fair, I know. But right now, it's the only way to protect yourself. By the time Ryan arrived that evening, she was already packing up her locker. He found her in the changing room, her hands shaking as she folded her scrubs into a plastic bag. The sound of the door closing behind him made her freeze. Karen, he said quietly. I just came from administration. They showed me the statement they're planning to release. I told them I'd take responsibility. She turned, eyes red. Responsibility for what? Being kind? Bringing me coffee? You didn't do anything wrong. Neither did you. Then why am I the one losing my job? Ryan's jaw tightened. You're not losing it. I'll fix this. Don't, she said sharply. Don't you dare try to fix this. He looked taken aback. You live in a world where mistakes have no consequences, she continued, voice trembling. You snap your fingers and problems disappear. But that's not my world, Ryan. When people look at me, they don't see someone important. They see a nurse who got too close to a billionaire. That's not how I see you. Her throat constricted. It doesn't matter how you see me. You'll still wake up rich tomorrow. You'll still have your company. Your last name will protect you. I don't have that luxury. He took a hesitant step closer. Karen, please. Let me. She flinched back. Don't. Just, don't make this harder. He stopped, his expression crumbling. You're really quitting? She nodded, tears stinging her eyes. I have to. There's no coming back from this, not here. What about my father? He'll ask for you. Her voice cracked. Then tell him I said goodbye. She walked past him before he could answer, the scent of antiseptic and coffee lingering between them like a memory that hurt too much to keep. Outside the hospital, the press vans were still parked by the curb, their cameras glinting in the evening light. She pulled her hood up and kept her head down, pushing through the noise, the flashes, the shouted questions. Miss Brown. Is it true you're dating Ryan Donnell? Are you resigning because of the scandal? Does Donnell Enterprises plan to issue a statement? She didn't say a word. By the time she reached her car, her hands were shaking too hard to hold the keys. She sat behind the wheel, staring through the windshield at the hospital lights flickering against the dusk. The place that had been her sanctuary, the one constant in her life, wasn't hers anymore. Her phone buzzed on the seat beside her. A text from Ryan. Please. Don't walk away like this. We can fix it. Together. Karen closed her eyes. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she powered off her phone and started the car. Inside the hospital, Ryan stood by the window of his father's room, watching the city fade into night. He'd spent the last hour arguing with the board, calling reporters, trying to undo what the world had already decided to believe. But none of it mattered. Karen was gone. He looked down at the now cold cup of coffee in his hand, the one he'd brought for her out of habit, and felt something hollow open up inside him. For the first time in his life, all the money in the world couldn't fix what he'd broken. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It was the soft, steady kind that made the city feel smaller, quieter. Karen sat on her couch in the half-light of her apartment, wrapped in an old blanket, the muted hum of the refrigerator the only sound. The TV flickered silently across the room, some late-night rerun she wasn't really watching. It had been a week since she'd walked out of St. Luke's. A week since she'd traded 12-hour shifts and patient alarms for silence that pressed too heavy against her chest. She still woke up at dawn, her body trained by years of habit, only to remember she had nowhere to go. Her phone stayed face down on the table. Calls from Marcy went unanswered. Messages from hospital staff offering awkward sympathy gathered in her inbox like dust. And one message she couldn't bring herself to open, Ryan's last text. "You didn't deserve this." She deleted it without replying. He was part of the life she'd left behind. The scandal. The shame. The reminder that good intentions weren't always enough. She'd spent years building a wall around herself, and she wasn't about to let him knock it down again. But life, she was learning, had a way of finding cracks in even the strongest walls. The knock came just after 8. 3 sharp taps, measured, polite, unfamiliar. Karen frowned, tightening her blanket around her shoulders. Nobody visited her this late. She hesitated before peering through the peephole. And froze. Ryan stood in the hallway, rain dripping from his coat, his hair damp and messy. He wasn't wearing one of his tailored suits tonight, just a dark sweater, jeans, and exhaustion in his eyes. In his hand, he held an envelope. She opened the door halfway, her voice cool but guarded. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," he said quietly. "Please, just give me 5 minutes." "You've already done enough," she replied. "I know," he said. "And I'm trying to make it right." He extended the envelope toward her. "This is yours." Karen frowned but took it, more out of confusion than curiosity. The paper was slightly damp from the rain, her name written across the front in clean, careful handwriting. "What is this?" "Open it," Ryan said. She hesitated, then tore it open. Inside were several typed pages, official letterhead, proposal formatting, and her own words. Her breath caught. It was her proposal, the community nursing outreach program she'd written months ago. A project she'd submitted to the hospital board and never heard back about. She'd poured her heart into it, mobile care units for underfunded neighborhoods, free home check-ins for elderly patients, preventive education for families. She'd been told it was too ambitious, not financially practical. "How did you get this?" she whispered. "The board had it in their archives," Ryan said softly. "Your supervisor forwarded it for review before everything happened. I saw your name on the cover page." She looked up at him sharply. "You went through hospital files?" "I made a few calls," he admitted. "But that's not the point. The point is, it's brilliant. You saw a need nobody else did. You had a plan that could actually change lives, and they ignored it." Karen shook her head slowly. "So what, you're here to tell me it was a nice idea? You don't have to." "I don't just think it's a nice idea," Ryan interrupted. "I want to fund it." The words landed like a thunderclap in the quiet room. She blinked. "What?" "I want you to run it," he said simply. "Under Donnell Enterprises. With full autonomy, full salary, and your name on the foundation. I'll provide the resources, but the vision stays yours." Karen stared at him, disbelief flooding her. "You can't be serious." "I am." Her pulse quickened. "So this is your solution? You think you can throw money at me until I stop being mad?" Ryan flinched but didn't look away. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" she demanded, stepping closer. "Charity? Guilt? Some rich man's way of cleaning up the mess he made?" "It's belief," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "I believe in what you built. I believe in you." Her throat tightened. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Say things like that." He took a breath. "You've spent your life taking care of people who can't pay you back. You do it because you care. I've spent mine surrounded by people who care because they should. You're the first person I've met who does it because it's right. That matters." She turned away, blinking hard. "Ryan, this doesn't fix what happened." "I know," he said quietly. "But maybe it can build something better." Karen sank onto the arm of the couch, staring at the papers in her hands. Her name printed neatly on the proposal stared back at her. Karen Brown, RN, project lead. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain drummed softly against the windows, filling the silence between heartbeats. Finally, she whispered, "If I said yes, it would have to be on my terms." Ryan nodded immediately. "Of course. It has to stay transparent. Independent. No PR campaigns, no branding this as some Donnell charity stunt." "Done. And I choose my own staff. Whoever you want." She looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of hesitation. There was none. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," he said. "You have something that can change how this city sees healthcare. I have the means to make it happen. So why shouldn't we?" Karen stared down at the papers again. Her proposal. Her dream. Something she thought had died the moment she walked out of that hospital. Her fingers trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages. Her notes, her ideas, her passion. He'd read every word. "You really read all this?" "Twice," Ryan said softly. "And I highlighted the parts one didn't understand." Which, for the record, was a lot. Despite herself, she smiled, a small reluctant thing. "You're impossible." "I've been told that," he said, smiling faintly. Silence settled again, gentler this time. Karen exhaled slowly. "All right. I'll do it." Ryan's brows lifted, hope flashing in his eyes. "You will." "On one condition." "Name it." She met his gaze. "If this ever becomes about you, your name, your company, or your guilt, I walk away. No second chances." He nodded without hesitation. "Agreed." She hesitated for a heartbeat, then reached for a pen on the table. Her signature slid across the bottom of the contract, clean and certain. When she handed it back, Ryan's expression softened in a way she hadn't seen since before the scandal. Relieved, grateful, almost proud. "You just changed a lot of lives, Karen." She looked down, smiling faintly. "I think we both did." He held out his hand, and after a small pause, she took it. His grip was warm, steady. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was falling. Later that night, long after he'd left, Karen sat on her couch staring at the signed papers on the table. The rain had stopped. The city lights shimmered through the window, casting soft reflections on the floor. Somewhere deep inside, something fragile stirred, a small cautious hope she hadn't felt in years. Maybe this wasn't an ending after all. Maybe it was the beginning. The first morning of the foundation's opening smelled like fresh paint and coffee. Karen stood in the lobby of the newly renovated Donnell Community Healthcare Foundation, staring at the gleaming glass doors that bore her name etched beneath the logo. Director, Karen Brown, RN. Even now, she couldn't quite believe it. It had been 4 months since the night Ryan showed up at her apartment with that envelope. 4 months of planning, meetings, paperwork, sleepless nights, and cautious hope. And now somehow it was real. The walls were lined with photographs of volunteers and nurses, some of them from the very neighborhoods the foundation would serve. Banners hung from the rafters with words like compassion, access, healing. Ryan stood near the front desk, shaking hands with city officials and donors. He wore no tie today, just a crisp white shirt with rolled sleeves and that easy, grounded confidence that somehow no longer intimidated her. When their eyes met across the room, he smiled. Not the practiced public smile of a businessman, but the quiet, familiar one that belonged only to her. Karen smiled back before she realized she was doing it. Later that afternoon, after the press had left and the ribbon-cutting ceremony was over, the staff gathered for coffee in the lounge. Mr. Donnell had come, too. The older man looked stronger than she'd ever seen him, his cheeks less pale, his eyes bright. "You've done good, Nurse Karen," he said, taking her hand with a surprisingly firm grip. She smiled warmly. "You're looking good yourself, Mr. Donnell." "I have my son to thank for that," he said. Then he added quieter, "And maybe you too." She blushed, shaking her head. "I just did my job." The older man chuckled. "That's what my late wife used to say every time she saved me from myself. You remind me of her, you know. Kind heart. Stubborn as hell." Across the room, Ryan caught her eye, clearly amused by his father's comment. I'll take that as a compliment, she said, smiling. It is, the elder Donnell said. Thank you for giving my son something to believe in again. Karen's chest tightened at that. He did that on his own, she said softly. But as she looked over at Ryan, his sleeve still rolled up, tie forgotten, a streak of ink on his wrist from signing too many documents, she realized how much they both changed. He'd built empires before, but this was different. This wasn't about power. This was about purpose. And maybe, about her. The following weeks blurred into a rhythm neither of them expected. Days were filled with site visits, budget reviews, and late meetings with contractors. Nights were quieter, pizza boxes on the conference table, laughter echoing through empty hallways as they worked long past midnight. Karen found herself learning things about him she'd never imagined before. That he couldn't cook to save his life. That he hated the sound of rain on glass because it reminded him of hospital nights after his mother died. That he kept a small photo of her in his office, right beside a worn stethoscope she'd given him when he graduated college. And in return, he learned her small things too. That she hummed under her breath when concentrating. That she always triple-checked her patient files. That she still wore the silver ring her sister gave her when she graduated nursing school, though the band was thin and scuffed now. It wasn't romance, not yet. But it was something close. Something quiet and unspoken, like gravity pulling two people toward the same center without either of them realizing it. One night, around midnight, they were the only two left in the building. Stacks of reports lay open across the long conference table, illuminated by the soft glow of the desk lamp. Karen's hair was tied in a loose bun, her eyes half-lidded with exhaustion as she reviewed supply lists. Ryan leaned against the edge of the table, watching her with quiet amusement. You should go home, he said gently. So should you, she murmured, not looking up. He smiled. Touché. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the scratch of her pen and the rustle of paper. Eventually, her writing slowed. The pen slipped from her fingers, her head drooping forward slightly. Ryan chuckled softly. Karen. No response. She'd fallen asleep sitting upright, chin resting on her hand, still surrounded by charts and notes. For a long moment, he just looked at her. The exhaustion etched into her face. The faint smile that lingered even in sleep. The steady rise and fall of her breathing. Something inside him shifted, gentle, certain, inevitable. He shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders, careful not to wake her. Then quietly he whispered, You save lives every day. You saved mine too. Karen stirred slightly, her eyelashes fluttering. Ryan, she murmured, her voice groggy. He froze mid-motion, caught like a teenager sneaking out of curfew. Sorry, he said softly. Didn't mean to wake you. She blinked, realizing his jacket was around her. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. Their eyes met in the dim light, something fragile stretching between them. For the first time since the scandal, Karen didn't feel the weight of caution pressing down on her chest. She didn't see the CEO or the billionaire heir. Just a man, tired, kind, trying. You shouldn't say things like that, she said quietly, repeating the words she'd once told him. He smiled faintly. I know. But it's still true. The air between them thickened. Karen stood slowly, still holding his jacket around her shoulders. You're impossible, you know that? So I've heard, he said, his tone lighter, teasing. But his eyes were soft, hopeful, even. She took a step closer before realizing it, her heart drumming faster than it should. Ryan hesitated, watching her carefully. Karen. She swallowed hard. If you're about to say something that changes everything, maybe don't. He nodded slightly. Then maybe I'll just do something instead. And before she could reply, he leaned in. The kiss was soft, hesitant at first, as if asking permission rather than taking it. A quiet meeting halfway between fear and want. She could taste the faint trace of coffee and exhaustion, could feel the warmth of his hand brushing against hers. When he finally pulled back, he didn't step away. Neither of them spoke for several long, fragile seconds. Then Karen whispered, You really don't listen, do you? Ryan smiled. Not when it comes to you. She tried to frown, but her lips curved instead. You're going to regret that. Doubt it, he said, and she could hear the sincerity in his voice. Later that night, as Karen walked to her car, the city lights reflected off the wet pavement. She still felt the ghost of his touch on her lips, the weight of his jacket draped around her shoulders. Everything about it should have scared her, the timing, the risk, the memories of how quickly things could unravel. But for the first time in a long time, it didn't. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope that maybe this wasn't a mistake. Maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something more. The lights from the ballroom chandeliers shimmered like crystal constellations. Karen stood near the edge of the grand room, the sound of clinking glasses and polite laughter weaving around her like an elegant trap. She'd been to charity events before, always as staff, never as a guest. Tonight felt strange, wearing a sleek navy dress instead of scrubs, heels instead of sneakers. The Donnell Community Healthcare Foundation was hosting its first gala, an evening meant to celebrate their success and secure future donors. But to Karen, it felt like walking into the lion's den. Everywhere she turned, she caught whispers. Smiles that didn't quite reach eyes. Cameras that lingered too long. The nurse who caught the billionaire, someone murmured behind her. She cleaned bedpans 6 months ago and now she's giving speeches, another whispered. She tried to ignore it, lifting her chin slightly. She'd promised herself she wouldn't let them see her flinch. Across the room, Ryan was surrounded by investors and board members, calm and charismatic as ever. When his gaze found hers, his expression softened immediately, like the noise of the room fell away for him too. He crossed the floor toward her, the crowd parting instinctively. "You look incredible," he said quietly, offering his arm. Karen smiled, though her voice was steady and restrained. "I'm still not sure I belong here." "Of course you do," he said. "You built this." "We built this," she corrected. Ryan smiled. "Then we both belong." Dinner passed in a blur of speeches and polite applause. The foundation had raised over $2 million in pledges before dessert was even served. Karen should have felt triumphant, but the tightness in her chest only grew. She caught fragments of conversation at the nearby tables. He always liked his projects hands-on. Poor thing doesn't know she's temporary. When she excused herself to get some air, the marble hallway outside felt like a sanctuary. She leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly, the echo of laughter muffled by the heavy doors. Still hiding from the cameras? Karen turned, and froze. Standing near the bar was a tall, statuesque woman with dark red lipstick and a confidence that filled the space like perfume. "Clara," Karen said carefully. She knew the name, she'd seen it in the papers once. Ryan's ex-fiancée. The socialite who'd once graced the front pages beside him at corporate galas. Clara smiled thinly, her gaze sweeping over Karen's simple dress. "I thought it was you. The infamous nurse." Karen stiffened. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Oh, come now," Clara said smoothly, sipping her champagne. "You must know what people are saying. That Ryan's latest charity project turned into his latest fling." "That's not true." Clara's smile sharpened. "Of course not. You're far too noble for that." She leaned in slightly, voice dropping to a purr. "Tell me, does it ever bother you? Knowing that when the lights go out and the money fades, he'll go back to the world he came from, and you'll still be you." Karen's breath caught, but she didn't answer. Clara tilted her head. "You're very brave, I'll give you that. Not many women would risk being his charity case twice." That was the final blow. Karen set her glass down with a trembling hand. "Excuse me." She turned and walked quickly toward the exit, her heels echoing against the marble. Her vision blurred as humiliation rose hot in her throat. She'd survived worse, gossip, scandal, heartbreak, but something about Clara's words scraped too close to an old wound. Too ordinary. Too small. Not enough. The same words her ex-husband once used when he walked out the door. She reached the edge of the ballroom just as Ryan stepped on stage to give his closing speech. The lights caught him in soft gold, his voice smooth and practiced as he thanked the donors and medical partners. Karen kept walking, ignoring the pounding in her chest. "Karen," Ryan's voice carried across the microphone, stopping her mid-step. She froze. Every head in the room turned toward her. Ryan was no longer reading from the teleprompter. He was looking directly at her. "Before we close," he said, "there's someone I need to thank." Her breath hitched. "Ryan, don't," she whispered under her breath. But he continued, voice steady, resonating through the hush. This foundation wouldn't exist without Karen Brown. She's the reason we're here tonight, the reason hundreds of families will have access to care they never thought possible. The crowd shifted, curious murmurs rippling through the air. But more than that, Ryan went on, his tone deepening, Karen reminded me what real compassion looks like. Not the kind that comes with a checkbook, but the kind that shows up every day and fights for people who can't fight for themselves. Clara's expression darkened in the crowd. Ryan's next words rang out, clear and defiant. Karen isn't my charity. She's my choice. She saw the man, not the money. The ballroom fell silent. For a moment, all Karen could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat. Every whisper vanished. Every stare faded into nothing. Ryan stepped down from the stage and crossed the floor toward her, unhurried but certain. The press cameras clicked furiously, light flashing like tiny bursts of lightning. He stopped in front of her, his voice lower now, meant for her alone. "You can leave if you want," he said softly. "But I couldn't let them keep writing our story for us." Karen's eyes burned. "Ryan, I love what we've built," he said. "But without you, it means nothing." The tears came before she could stop them. Not loud or dramatic, just quiet, grateful tears for everything she thought she'd lost and found again in one moment of truth. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "I know," he said with a faint smile. "But I don't regret it." She hesitated, every instinct telling her to guard her heart, to walk away before the world twisted this into something ugly again. But for once, her instincts were silent. Instead, she reached for his hand. The crowd erupted in applause, the sound thunderous, overwhelming, and yet strangely distant. Cameras flashed as he lifted her hand gently and pressed it to his chest. He leaned closer, voice just for her. "You once told me to stop saying things that sounded like promises. So this isn't a promise, Karen. It's the truth." She smiled through her tears. "Then I guess it's my turn to believe you." Later that night, after the guests had left and the ballroom stood empty, Karen and Ryan lingered on the balcony overlooking the city. The cool wind carried faint echoes of laughter and music from below. She rested her hands on the railing, watching the lights shimmer like 1,000 tiny miracles. Ryan stepped beside her, slipping off his jacket and draping it over her shoulders. "You're making a habit of that," she teased softly. "It seems to work," he said, smiling. For a long while, they stood in silence. No titles. No cameras. Just two people who had fought their way through noise and found something real on the other side. Karen turned to him finally, her voice quiet but sure. "You really meant what you said, didn't you?" "Every word." And this time, she didn't hesitate. She kissed him, not out of fear or defiance, but because she finally could. 6 months later, the mornings felt different. Karen woke not to hospital alarms or the buzz of her old pager, but to sunlight spilling across her apartment floor and the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. It was still early, the city outside just beginning to stir, but she'd been up since dawn, reviewing patient reports and field schedules for the Foundation's new mobile clinic. Old habits died hard. The Donnell Community Healthcare Foundation had become something bigger than either of them expected. What started as an idea scribbled on a proposal page was now a full-fledged operation. 3 clinics, 40 nurses, and hundreds of families served. Karen sat at her desk by the window, papers spread out around her, a pen tucked behind her ear. She still wore her nurse's badge pinned to her blazer, a quiet reminder of where it all began. Not an employee now, but a leader. Still, every time she looked at it, she felt grounded. There was a soft knock on the door. "Still working?" Ryan's voice floated in, warm and familiar. Karen looked up and smiled as he stepped into the room, holding 2 steaming cups. He was dressed casually this morning, white shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, a faint trace of sleep still in his eyes. "You know me," she said. "If I'm not fixing a chart, I'm fixing a schedule." Ryan set one of the cups in front of her and leaned against the desk. "And here I was hoping you'd take the day off." "Days off are overrated," she said, but she smiled. He lifted an eyebrow. "You said that 6 months ago. I'm starting to think you actually believe it." Karen took a slow sip of the coffee. It was exactly the way she liked it, extra cream, 1 sugar. He never forgot. He watched her quietly for a moment, then asked, "Do you ever miss it?" "The hospital." She thought about it. "Sometimes," she admitted. The routine. The chaos. The sound of monitors at 3 in the morning. And the patience. Always, she said softly. But I don't think I left that part behind. I just found a new way to keep helping. Ryan smiled. You did more than that. You built something that changes lives. Karen looked up at him, eyes warm. We built it. He tilted his head. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Ryan chuckled, then took the seat across from her, pulling one of the files closer. So what's today's agenda, Director Brown? Karen rolled her eyes. Please don't call me that. But you earned it, he teased. Besides, it's got a nice ring to it. She gave him a look that made him laugh out loud, a sound that filled the room and softened the edges of everything. For a few minutes, they went over paperwork together, shoulders brushing occasionally, the quiet rhythm of their partnership as natural as breathing. It amazed Karen sometimes how easily they fit into each other's lives now, how something that had started with caution and doubt had turned into something steady real. When they finished, Ryan leaned back in his chair, studying her with that same gentle intensity that always made her heart stutter. You know, he said, you've barely taken a break since the foundation launched. Maybe it's time you let someone else make the coffee for once. Karen smiled into her cup. You? I've seen how you make coffee. It's practically a crime. He feigned offense. Excuse me, I've improved. Really? She said, raising an eyebrow. I can even make toast now, he said proudly. Mostly without burning it. Karen laughed, shaking her head. What am I going to do with you? Let me make breakfast, he said simply. Just once. You might be surprised. Surprised or hospitalized? Ryan grinned. A little faith, Nurse Brown. She gave him a long, teasing look. Faith, huh? Funny coming from a man who thought buying a whole foundation was a normal apology. He laughed quietly. Best decision I ever made. There was something in his tone, soft, serious, that made her chest tighten. She looked at him, really looked, and for a moment the world outside the window seemed to fall away. The lines on his face were a little deeper now, softened by time and honesty. The man who once hid behind corporate walls now spent his mornings visiting clinics, learning names, shaking hands with families who didn't know, or care, how much he was worth. He'd changed. Maybe they both had. Karen reached across the table, brushing her fingers lightly against his hand. You ever think about how far we've come? Ryan's thumb traced small circles on her skin. Every day. She smiled faintly. Sometimes I still can't believe any of this happened. He leaned closer, his voice low and warm. Believe it. Because you made it happen. Karen's heart swelled at his words, quiet but sure. We both did, she said again. Ryan's smile turned softer. You really can't stop saying that, can you? No, she said, laughing lightly. Because it's true. He stood then, rounding the desk to her side. Then maybe I should show you just how much I agree. Before she could reply, he kissed her, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't need to prove anything. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. So, about breakfast? She laughed, the sound echoing like sunlight through the quiet apartment. Fine, she said. But if you burn the eggs again, I'm revoking your kitchen privileges. Deal, he said, eyes bright. Later that morning, they sat together by the window, coffee cups balanced between them, sunlight painting the room in soft gold. The city buzzed faintly below, alive and full of motion. Karen looked out at it all, the clinics, the foundation, the life she never imagined she'd have, and felt a calm she hadn't known in years. Ryan nudged her playfully. You're smiling. I was just thinking, she said. You never stopped bringing me coffee. He chuckled. Some habits are worth keeping. Even when I didn't want it. Especially then. Karen tilted her head, eyes shining. You know, maybe it wasn't the coffee. Ryan smiled softly. No. Maybe it was the man who brought it. He leaned closer. I'll take that. They sat in silence for a while longer, watching the light shift across the skyline. Finally, Karen whispered, half to herself, I never expected kindness to look like this. Ryan smiled, brushing a thumb along her hand. Or love. She turned toward him, eyes warm. Or love to taste like coffee, warm, steady, and exactly the way I like it.
And that, my beautiful family, is how love found its way through hospital walls and morning coffee. Karen thought she was just surviving, another tired nurse holding the world together one patient at a time. But life had other plans. It sent her a man who saw her heart before her uniform, who reminded her that kindness isn't weakness, and that sometimes love begins with something as simple as coffee. Every morning. To everyone listening right now, if you've ever felt unseen, overlooked, or too ordinary for something extraordinary, hear me. Your story isn't over. The right people will see your light, even when you can't. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to click subscribe, type, "I still believe in love" in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. Because somewhere out there, your coffee moment is waiting. That quiet miracle that reminds you you're still worthy of warmth, care, and love that stays. Until next time, this is Mr. Crown Stories reminding you, you are enough, you are loved, and your next chapter might already be brewing.